The old saying goes, timing is everything. And I'm here to tell you, as a physical therapy business owner, nothing could be more from the truth in the outpatient physical therapy industry. So let's talk a little bit today on how you know it's actually the right time to sell your physical therapy business. Here's where we're going to start. It starts personal. And it really does. Until you have made the decision that you are ready to move on in your life from running your physical therapy business, you won't be in a good position to sell your business. So it really, yeah, it has to come from you, and it really needs to come from you first. You know, a lot of times when business owners start looking at planning their exit strategy, the thought is, well, I want to stop working. I'll make this up. If I'm 60 years old now, I want to stop working when I'm 65. So when I'm 65, then I'll start looking for a buyer and I'll sell my business. Well, if you want to be done when you're 65, you really have to look to sell the business in the next 1 to 2 years. Because I promise you this, you will get more value if you are willing to stay with the practice at least 3+ years after the transaction. And I know that sounds different from what maybe your friends or neighbors or business people in your towns may be telling you, but they're probably not in the physical therapy industry. And in this industry, people matter, and you as the owner are absolutely key and essential to the business going forward. So my point there is start your planning so that when you actually sell or partner with a larger company, you still have 3 to 5 years that you still want to continue to be working and engaged in helping to grow the business. And that's why finding the right partner is so important, because 3 years is a long time. It's a really long time. When I sold my business back in 1996, I stayed with NovaCare for 3 years. Fortunately, we were able to get, at that point in time, earnouts were very important, and one of the more popular ways to get folks money down the road of what they feel like they should have gotten when they sold the business. And so our earnout got paid out before that 3-year mark, and I left after 3 years on very good terms. All right, what is the next thing we need to talk about in terms of being ready and the timing for your business being ready? Well, you got to make sure that your financials and your operations are in order. What do I mean by in order? Well, as it relates to your financials, you need to be able to prove out your past, your present, and where the business is going in the future with your financial statements, your financial statements, your balance sheet, your cash flow statements. All of those need to be synced up and literally need to be defendable on every aspect of those reports. You know, for a larger company, we would recommend that you get either an audit or at the very least a review. When I say larger company, 10+ clinics, a couple $1 million of EBITDA, cash flow, those are businesses that it absolutely makes sense to have an audit performed, or at the very least a review. As you're looking at your financial statements, do they make sense? Can you tell your story of your business by looking at 2023, 24, 25, 26, projections into 27? Can you truly tell a story by looking at them? And is everything within those financial reports defendable? And this is where we go back to what I talked about last week, EBITDA. If you have adjustments to EBITDA, can you defend each and every one of those? And are those noted and highlighted so that they're very clear to the acquirer what they are? Now, operations, whole separate piece here, is also needs to be in order. Are you measuring and monitoring the operations within your business? Are you looking at KPIs? Are you looking at the metrics on a weekly basis? Do you set targets and standards for those KPIs, for those metrics that you have in your business? Are you taking full advantage of what we call charge capture, meaning charging the right things for the therapy that your therapists are providing and making sure that you are actually performing and doing therapeutic activity and everything is not just being billed as therapeutic exercise? And obviously, there's a lot more that goes into charge capture. But is that all in order? And can you tell a story with your operations? I'll give you an example. 2025, we had 2 new therapists. They were struggling somewhat on getting patients moving, getting patients in and out. They struggled. They had some overlap. They weren't able to bill the certain number of codes that we particularly expect from our therapists. But look how the end of the year has been winning out with those therapists now all in sync, and how we were able to train them and get them through that. That's the kind of operation stories that acquirers like. But you need to really know your operations. You need to know right offhand, what's your visits per referral? What's your units per visit? What's the percentage of 97350 therapeutic activity that you use as compared to 97110, which is therapeutic exercise? You really need to know those things off the cuff. I mean, literally off the cuff about your business. All right, now we're going to go from systems, right? Financial and operation systems. We're going to talk about people. And so this step is really about people, culture, and leadership. First, people. How did you get your people? What is the system that you are utilizing to recruit and get your people, your professional staff, your support staff, your administrative staff? What's the system that you use in order to get those people? And is that a system that just keeps running? That recruiting system, does it just keep running? Are you reaching out to schools, et cetera, et cetera? Now, if you can show the system and you have the people, which is so important to be fully staffed, really important. Again, if you want to be ready for the market, you really have to be as close to fully staffed as possible. The next is, are you retaining those people? And that's that's what we talk about when we say the word culture. Great cultures retain staff. What are you doing today, tomorrow, and in the future to build your culture? Is there a culture of positivity? Is there a culture of change, willingness to change? Is there a culture of patient-centeredness, keeping the focus that the patient needs to be the center of everything we do? And if someone were to ask you, define and describe, I should say, your culture, you would be able to do it in 1 to 2 minutes, just like that, and it would sound powerful, and it needs to be real. So I'll tell you what to do. Go home, look in the mirror, tell the mirror what your culture should be, and then make it that way. And then finally, leadership. Leadership is really important, especially, again, if you're looking at wanting to exit, even at that 3-year mark, wanting to exit, you need to have a very defined and aligned leadership group. Why is that so important? Because that's the future of your business. I give the 3-month test. If you were to go away on a 3-month vacation and not have anybody be able to call you, how would your business fare through that 3 months? The other thing to start thinking about as you're getting ready for an exit or to find a larger partner is, what role do you want those leaders to play going forward? If you were to be acquired, partnered with a new company, what role would you want them to play? And how can we set them up to play that role? Do you want them to have equity? Because if they have equity and you have a large chunk of equity, you're very much aligned moving forward with a partner to grow your business because you all get your equity out at the end. So really, really important that you consider what could the possibilities be for my leadership group with a larger company. And I'm going back to the personal side here, but what does that company look like? I'm looking into the future and I'm seeing what that company looks like with my leadership team being a part of this new company and being a partner with this new company. What does that look like for you? What's the best makeup of a company out there? Because that's the company that's going to fit your leadership group. There are times when we've worked with our businesses and business owners that we work with, and we created opportunities for their leadership group to gain equity in the new company when you sell company and you roll equity forward, for them also to have equity. And we can either do that before the transaction or that can happen during the transaction, where many of the large companies want your leaders to be in equity positions, and they will help and guide with that, not only just structurally, but financially as well. All right, next, what is your growth strategy? I'm going to make this one pretty short. What are acquirers looking for? Look, most of the real acquirers in this current market are backed by private equity. That's big money. What does that big money want? They want growth. So if they come to your company and they see that there really has not been a lot of growth and there's no plan for future growth, that's not going to improve and increase your multiple. And I would tell you that you're really not ready for the market if you have not been able to show and at least have some kind of growth in your past. It can be up and down, and there can be some, stories about that. But then clearly, what is your growth strategy for the future? Whether you're a 1-clinic business, a 10-clinic business, or a 50-clinic business, what is your strategy for the future? That tells a lot to an acquirer. And it also says, it gives them the idea of, hey, there's a train at the station, it's taking off, and acquirers, which one of you wants to jump on that train? That's what it's telling them when you can tell and work through your growth strategy. Remember, you don't want to grow to the partner. You want to grow through and beyond the partner. So once you've partnered, you want to show that partner now with unlimited capital, with lots of systems and structure and support. How much can we grow now? I've seen many businesses. I'll give you one example. We sold a business in 2022. It is now 2026. When they sold their business, they had 22 clinics. Today, they have 45. So again, these companies can provide a lot of support with growth. And that's what we want you to be able to show them where you want to go. And then they'll show you how they can support you. And you'll be able to pick the best partner by who will support you best. All right, next one. Can you tell your story and your company's story? There's a story here, and acquirers love to hear and see your story. We put your story together in a confidential information memorandum. It's a book on your business. And that's great, but you need to be able to tell that story. And that story needs to be compelling. Okay, not just we got started and, we grew a couple clinics and no, we need to be very detailed on how you did that. What was the strategy? What were you thinking back 20 years ago when you started this business and you looked out into the market and you saw what you wanted to create? And we can help you with that story. Okay, we're not trying to embellish a story, but many times just asking questions to a business owner, it brings out that story, and we're like, write it down now, because this is huge. We need this. Write it down. So your company's story and your story is really important. Remember, yes, they're buying your company. Yes, they're buying your EBITDA, but they are buying you. They're buying you and your talents going forward. So your story is also really, really important on how you grew from where you were when you first started your business, your first clinic, and when you got to your third and your seventh and your 10th, and how things changed and how you realigned your leadership group. All those things need to be put in a very compelling story. All right. Finally, and I would tell you, your story and this next fact is absolutely the most important that I'm going to talk about today. Is there a market? Is there a market for your business? Meaning, is there an acquirer out there for your business? Well, what I would tell you is that has to be very carefully analyzed, because depending upon where you are geographically, there may be companies that have not come into your market that are looking for a platform, and you would be that platform. There may be companies that are already in your market. They're looking for add-on opportunities for some smaller companies. But who is actually out there and buying companies like yours? Like yours, whether you're a 1, 3, 10, 50, or 100 clinic business, we have to determine whether there's a market out there for your company. You know, if we describe the market right now, I think the market right now is solid for companies with, let's call it less than 5, maybe 8 million of EBITDA. For companies under that, I think there's a really good market out there. Why? Because we're still waiting on some of the really, really large platforms, companies with 500 million of EBITDA to get to that next level, whether it's going public or whether it's a larger private equity group. Once those things happen, once those transactions happen, I think you're going to see a very different market at the upper level, the big companies. And that's important because new companies don't want to come in the market if they don't believe that at some point in time, larger investment firms are going to be willing to invest in them. So it's important. But right now, what we're seeing is a lot of the private equity-backed companies are looking to grow. They're looking to grow through acquisitions, as I said, somewhere 5 to 8 million and below. Single clinics, 3 clinics, 15 clinics, 20 clinics, 3 million of EBITDA. Those are companies that in today's market are very marketable, and we can bring many companies to a process with that kind of outlook, or I'm sorry, not outlook, with that kind of financial position. If you got 50 million of EBITDA, there still may be a market out there, but you may want to hold on just a little bit more. But for companies, again, 10 million of EBITDA and lower, I think there's a huge market out there for you. So I'm going to finish with this. When's the right time to sell your physical therapy business? When you are right. And there's all the things I just talked about, your staff, your financials, your operations, your story. When you are right and the market is right, and when those paths intersect, that's when you will get the best deal available in the market. You always need to be ready. If you're not ready, you need to start getting ready today, because when that market starts to peak, you want to be ready and have the option. What we see very commonly is that companies that wait too long to prepare, they then have something happen in their lives and they want to do a transaction, but their business is just not ready. And as there's companies out there, that are looking and seeking, what you have to remember is that it's a whole bunch of planes up there as acquirers, right? But they all have different levels of fuel in their tank, all right? So some companies are fueled up very, very well. And depending upon, their number of years with this private equity group that they may have started with a number of years back, will largely depend upon whether they're ready for a business like yours. So you got all these planes up there. They all have different fuel levels. Well, they're all going to land in different places. Okay. They're not all going to land in Pennsylvania or all going to land in California. They're looking strategically across the country. We have the ability to look at those planes and see from their eyes looking down at you at what we see. So we look at where their clinics are, we look at where your clinics are, and then we look at each company one by one of each acquirer. And it's just a remarkable way to look at what is the opportunity for you. Because when you're ready, one of the most important things we believe in getting the best deal is to make sure that you put your business in a competitive process and you utilize a very, very, very capable investment banker, capable consultant, capable company that has experience in the outpatient rehabilitation industry. That is key and critical. So thank you all for joining me today. Again, I'm Paul Martin. It was great talking to you. If you have any questions about what we discussed today, just click below. Let's talk. Thanks again and have a great weekend.